I was standing by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, when Olivia Marsh said it. Just tossed it out there, casual as asking about the weather. "Oh, we're removing you from the approval chain for the Q4 client deliverables." I turned. She was scrolling through her phone, not even looking at me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. My stomach did the slow, sickening flip. "I'm sorry, what?" She glanced up, gave me this tight little smile. "Yeah, we're streamlining the process. You take too long to decide on things, Demi. It holds everyone up." The words hung there. I could hear the hum of the HVAC system, the distant clatter of keyboards from the open office beyond the glass walls. My hands felt cold. "Too long," I repeated. "Right. So we'll just loop in Chloe and the senior team directly. Keep things moving." She stood, smoothing her blazer. "It's not personal. Just efficiency." I didn't respond. Couldn't, really. There was this tightness in my chest, like something was wound too tight and about to snap. But I nodded. Smiled even. Said something about understanding. She left. I stayed there by the window, staring at nothing. That was Tuesday. By Thursday, everything had changed. But let me back up. You need to understand how we got here. Because none of this makes sense without context, and the context is everything. I joined Valiant Technologies 3 years ago as a quality assurance lead. The company was smaller then, scrappier. We had maybe 40 employees, mostly engineers, and a handful of project managers. The culture was collaborative. People actually talked to each other. When someone flagged a problem, we fixed it together. My role was straightforward: review client deliverables before they went out the door. Software patches, system updates, technical documentation. Anything with our name on it had to pass through my desk. I checked for bugs, security vulnerabilities, compliance issues. The tedious, unglamorous work that keeps companies from getting sued or losing clients. I was good at it. No, I was excellent at it. In my first year, I caught a critical security flaw in a payment processing module that would have exposed thousands of customer credit card numbers. The development team had missed it entirely. So had the project lead. I found it during a routine check, 2 days before deployment. The CEO at the time, Frank Donovan, called me into his office. Told me I'd saved the company from a potential lawsuit that could have bankrupted us. He gave me a bonus. Started introducing me in meetings as our safety net. That felt good. It felt like I mattered. Over the next 2 years, I built out the entire QA framework from scratch. Created standardized checklists, automated testing protocols, documentation systems. I trained 4 junior analysts. We went from catching problems after they happened to preventing them before they started. The company grew. We hit 200 employees. Opened a second office. Landed contracts with Fortune 500 clients. Revenue tripled. And my team's work was a significant part of that growth. I could trace it directly. Clients stayed because we delivered quality. They renewed contracts because we didn't screw up. I worked 60-hour weeks during crunch periods. Stayed late to review urgent patches. Came in on weekends when launches were tight. I did it because I believed in what we were building. Because I thought my contributions were valued. Then, about 8 months ago, everything shifted. Frank retired. The board brought in outside leadership to take us to the next level. That's how they phrased it in the company-wide email. Next level. New chapter. Strategic growth. Olivia Marsh arrived as the new VP of Operations. She came from a massive tech conglomerate, had an MBA from somewhere prestigious, wore expensive suits. In her first all-hands meeting, she talked a lot about agility, lean processes, eliminating bottlenecks. She used the word synergy 4 times in 10 minutes. I remember thinking she seemed competent. Professional. A little corporate, maybe, but fine. The first month was quiet. She scheduled one-on-ones with all the department heads, sat in on meetings, observed workflows. She asked me questions about our QA process. How long did reviews take? What was our reject rate? How often did we send things back for revisions? I answered honestly. Thoroughness takes time. Most reviews cleared within 24 hours, but complex projects might need 3 or 4 days. Our reject rate was about 15%, which was healthy. It meant we were catching problems. She nodded, took notes, smiled. Then the changes started. Small things at first. She introduced new approval forms. Required additional documentation for every review. We had to log our time in a new system, break down every hour into 6-minute increments. She wanted metrics. Data. Proof of value. Fine. I adapted. I started tracking everything obsessively, building reports that showed exactly what my team caught, what it would have cost if we'd missed it. I thought I was being proactive. Demonstrating our worth. But the requests kept coming. More reporting. More meetings about the reporting. New stakeholders added to review chains. People who didn't understand the technical details but needed to weigh in on timeline feasibility. Reviews that used to take a day started taking 3, not because the work was more complex, but because we were waiting on sign-offs from people who added no actual value. I mentioned this to Olivia in one of our check-ins. Carefully. Diplomatically. Said the additional approval layers were creating delays without improving quality. She gave me that smile again. I appreciate your perspective, Demi. But we need to balance thoroughness with speed to market. Our clients expect rapid turnaround. They also expect things to work correctly, I said. Of course. And I trust you'll find ways to maintain quality while improving efficiency. Translation: work faster, but don't you dare let anything slip through. The pressure mounted. Deadlines got tighter. The development team started pushing back on my review notes, saying we didn't have time for extensive revisions. Project managers began scheduling delivery dates before QA review was even complete, then acted surprised when I flagged issues that required delays. I started getting excluded from planning meetings. Would show up to my desk and find out a new project was already in motion, timeline locked, my review window compressed to hours instead of days. When I pushed back, Olivia would say things like, "We need to be more flexible," or "Let's not let perfect be the enemy of good." I felt like I was going crazy. Like the rules had changed and nobody had told me. Then came the Patterson Industries project. Patterson was our biggest client. Multi-million-dollar contract. They needed a custom inventory management system integrated with their existing infrastructure. The timeline was aggressive but doable if everyone did their part. I was included in the initial kickoff meeting. Reviewed the requirements, flagged potential compliance issues early. The system would be handling sensitive supplier data, which meant we needed specific security protocols and audit logging. I sent my notes to the project lead, a guy named Ian Fletcher. He acknowledged them. Said they'd build it in from the start. Weeks passed. I asked for status updates. Got vague responses about everything being on track. 2 weeks before the scheduled delivery, Ian finally sent me the build for review. I opened it and felt my blood pressure spike. None of my security requirements had been implemented. The audit logging was superficial, wouldn't pass any compliance check. There were hard-coded passwords in the configuration files. The data encryption was using deprecated algorithms that Patterson's own security team would reject on site. It was a disaster. I documented everything in a detailed report. Sent it to Ian with a clear assessment: this wasn't ready. We needed at least 2 more weeks to fix the critical issues. Ian forwarded my email to Olivia. She called me into her office within an hour. "Demi, I need you to be realistic about this." She was sitting behind her desk, fingers steepled. "We've committed to a delivery date. Patterson is expecting this next Friday." "I understand, but..." "The team has been working incredibly hard. Ian assures me the core functionality is solid." "The core functionality isn't the problem. The security implementation is fundamentally flawed. If we deliver this as is, Patterson will reject it immediately. Or worse, they'll deploy it and then discover the vulnerabilities themselves. Can we fix the most critical issues in the next few days? We can patch some things, but we need time to do it right. This isn't about being perfectionist. These are actual, serious problems." She sighed, like I was being difficult. "What if we deliver the core system on time and patch the security elements in a follow-up release?" I stared at her. "You want to deliver a system with known security flaws, to a client who's trusting us with sensitive business data, and then fix it later? As a pragmatic solution to meet our contractual obligations, yes. That's insane. And possibly illegal, depending on their data protection requirements. Her expression hardened. I need team players right now, Demi. People who can solve problems instead of just identifying them. The words hit like a slap. I'd been solving problems for 3 years. I'd built systems that prevented exactly this kind of nightmare. And now I was being told I wasn't a team player because I wouldn't rubber stamp garbage? I took a breath. Kept my voice level. I'm happy to work overtime to help fix these issues. But I can't approve this deliverable in its current state. It's my name on the quality certification. My professional reputation. Fine. She turned back to her computer. Write up what absolutely must be fixed. I'll have Ian prioritize it. I did. Sent her a prioritized list that night. Marked 10 items as critical, must fix before delivery. The next morning, Olivia forwarded my list to Ian with a note I wasn't supposed to see, but Ian accidentally replied all. Let's address the top 3 items and call it good. We need to ship this. 3 out of 10. I felt sick. I spent the next week working directly with the development team, pushing to fix as much as possible. We got through 6 of the critical items. Not perfect, but significantly better than it had been. I documented everything. Every remaining issue, every risk, every conversation where I'd raised concerns. We delivered to Patterson on schedule. They accepted it. For about 2 weeks, I thought maybe I'd been too worried. Maybe Olivia had been right about balancing perfection with pragmatism. Then Patterson's security team ran their own audit. They found the remaining vulnerabilities immediately. Sent back a scathing report. Threatened to terminate the contract unless we fixed everything within 10 days or they'd demand a full refund and penalty fees. Ian and his team worked around the clock to patch it. It cost us probably $50,000 in overtime and emergency resources. The client relationship was damaged. Patterson put us on probationary status, which meant every future deliverable would face extra scrutiny. I waited for Olivia to acknowledge what happened. To maybe admit that rushing had been a mistake. Instead, in the next operations meeting, she praised Ian and the development team for their heroic efforts to respond to unexpected client feedback. Unexpected. I said nothing. What was the point? But I started keeping better records. Every email, every review note, every conversation where I flagged a problem that got ignored. I backed everything up to my personal drive. I didn't know why, exactly. Just had this growing sense that I needed to protect myself. The months after Patterson were more of the same. Tighter timelines. More pressure to approve things faster. My review notes increasingly dismissed as overcautious or nitpicky. Olivia started making comments in meetings. Little digs that sounded like jokes but weren't. Let's get Demi's input, but remember, she sees problems everywhere. Laugh from the team. We should probably build in extra time for Demi's approval, since she likes to be thorough. Emphasis on thorough like it was a character flaw. I felt myself shrinking. Started second-guessing my own judgment. Maybe I was too rigid. Maybe I needed to adapt to the new culture. My performance review came up. 3 years of exceeding expectations, and suddenly I was rated as meets expectations with notes about needing to improve collaboration and embrace organizational change. No raise. No bonus. Olivia told me it was a growth opportunity. A chance to evolve my skill set. I smiled and said I understood. I started updating my resume that night. But I didn't leave. Not yet. Part of me was still hoping things would improve. Part of me felt like leaving would be admitting defeat. And then came that Tuesday in the conference room. We're removing you from the approval chain. You take too long to decide. I went back to my desk after she left. Sat there staring at my email inbox. My calendar was already filling up with project timelines that didn't include me. Meetings I wasn't invited to anymore. Chloe Pemberton, one of the senior engineers, would be taking over my responsibilities in the review process. She was smart, capable. But she didn't have QA training. Didn't have the same attention to detail. And she was already stretched thin with her development workload. This wasn't about efficiency. It was about removing me as an obstacle. I felt hollow. All those hours, all that work, all those problems I'd prevented. None of it mattered. I went home that night and didn't sleep. Just lay there in the dark, replaying every conversation, every meeting, every moment where I'd tried to do my job and been made to feel like I was the problem. Wednesday was quiet. I came in, worked on documentation, avoided everyone. Chloe stopped by my desk, looking uncomfortable. Hey, so, Olivia wants me to start reviewing the Hexagon Analytics deliverable. Can you send me your checklist? Sure, I said. Send it over. Thanks. And, I'm sorry about the change. I know this is your thing. It's fine. It wasn't fine. But what was I supposed to say? She lingered. If you want to do a quick informal review before I sign off, I wouldn't mind a second set of eyes. A tiny kindness. I appreciated it more than she probably knew. Let me know if you have questions, I said. She nodded and left. The Hexagon project was a data analytics platform for a healthcare client. Sensitive patient information, strict HIPAA compliance requirements. High stakes, complex technical specs. I'd reviewed the initial design documents months ago. Flagged several compliance concerns that needed addressing. Ian Fletcher was the lead again, which made me nervous, but I'd documented everything clearly. Thursday morning started normal. I was working on training materials for the junior analysts when my email pinged. Chloe, quick question, where's the HIPAA compliance documentation for Hexagon? Me, should be in the project folder under legal/compliance. I reviewed it in August and sent notes to Ian. Chloe, I don't see it. Just checked with Ian, he says it's handled but doesn't have the docs. Something cold settled in my stomach. Me, it's handled, or it's documented? Those aren't the same thing. Chloe, he says they built it into the system design, so there's no separate documentation needed. I pulled up my own records. Found my notes from August. I'd specifically outlined required documentation, data handling procedures, encryption standards, access logging, breach notification protocols. All of it legally required for HIPAA compliance. You can't just build it in without documentation. Auditors need paper trails. Proof that you've implemented required safeguards. Me, that's not how HIPAA works. We need explicit documentation. When is this supposed to deploy? Chloe, tomorrow. Clients already scheduled the rollout. Tomorrow. My hands were shaking. I took a breath, tried to think clearly. Me, can you ask Ian to send me what they have? Just so I can verify nothing's missing. Chloe, sure, give me a minute. I waited. Opened my files again. Started pulling together every email I'd sent about this project. Every requirement I'd documented. Every concern I'd raised. 20 minutes later, Ian sent over a folder. I opened it and started reviewing. The technical implementation looked solid. The system had proper encryption, access controls, audit logging. The actual functionality was fine. But there was almost no compliance documentation. No policies, no procedures, no evidence that we'd conducted required risk assessments. Nothing that would satisfy a HIPAA audit. If this deployed and the client ever got audited, they'd fail immediately. And we'd be liable for delivering a non-compliant system. I started drafting an email to Chloe. Kept it factual, unemotional. Listed the missing documentation, explained the regulatory requirements, attached my original notes from August showing I'd flagged this months ago. Before I could send it, my office door flew open. Olivia Marsh stormed in, face flushed, eyes blazing. Why did no one flag this? I looked up at her, genuinely confused. Flag what? The Hexagon compliance documentation. The client just called, asking for our HIPAA certification package. Ian says we don't have it. Why wasn't this caught in QA? The sheer audacity of the question left me momentarily speechless. She was standing over my desk, practically vibrating with fury. We deploy tomorrow. How could this slip through? I felt something shift inside me. That tight, wound-up thing in my chest finally snapped. But instead of breaking apart, it settled into something hard and clear. I flagged it, I said quietly. In August. I sent detailed notes to Ian outlining exactly what compliance documentation we needed. I copied you on that email. I don't remember any. August 14th. Subject line, Hexagon Analytics HIPAA requirements. I can forward it to you again if you'd like. Her mouth tightened. Well, clearly it wasn't followed up on. No, it wasn't. You should have. I was removed from the review process on Tuesday, I said, still in that same calm, even tone. You told me I took too long to decide. Chloe is handling approvals now. The color drained from her face slightly. She'd realized her mistake. This project was already in motion. I reviewed the initial requirements in August and flagged the compliance documentation issues then. I followed up twice in September asking for status updates. Ian told me it was handled. I documented all of this. You should have escalated if you weren't getting responses. Something hot flared in my chest, but I kept my voice level. I did escalate. To you. You told me not to be a bottleneck. Silence. The air in the room felt electric. She straightened, smoothed her blazer. Trying to regain composure. Well, we need to fix this now. Can you pull together the required documentation by end of day? No. She blinked. Excuse me? No. This isn't a documentation problem that can be fixed in a few hours. We need to conduct a full risk assessment, create data handling policies, establish breach notification procedures, potentially modify the system design based on what the assessment reveals. This is weeks of work. Maybe months, if we want to do it properly. That's not acceptable. We deploy tomorrow. Then you'll be deploying a non-compliant system. That's not your call to make anymore. I held her gaze. Actually, it is. My name is still on all the initial quality certifications for this project. If this deploys and fails a HIPAA audit, I'm professionally liable. So unless you're planning to remove my name from all project documentation, which would require explaining to the client why, then yes, it's very much my call. Her jaw clenched. You're being unreasonable. I'm being accurate. I need solutions, not problems. The solution is to delay deployment until we're actually compliant. Or deploy with explicit disclosure to the client that the compliance documentation is incomplete and will be delivered separately, which might violate your contract terms. Those are your options. She stared at me for a long moment. I could see her calculating, trying to find an angle. I'll need to escalate this to the executive team, she finally said. That's appropriate, I replied. She turned and left, not quite slamming the door but close. I sat there, heart pounding, hands still shaking. But underneath the adrenaline, I felt clear. Solid. I'd drawn a line. Within an hour, I got a meeting invitation for 4 o'clock. Executive conference room. Olivia, Ian, the CFO, and the chief legal officer. I spent the next 3 hours preparing. Printed every email, every note, every piece of documentation showing I'd flagged these issues months ago. Created a timeline showing exactly when I'd raised concerns and what responses I'd received. Built a clear breakdown of what compliance documentation was required and why. At 4 o'clock, I walked into that conference room with a thick folder and the clearest sense of purpose I'd felt in months. Olivia was already there, sitting next to Ian. He looked stressed, kept glancing at his laptop. The CFO, Richard Vance, sat at the head of the table. The CLO, Margaret Zhou, had legal pads spread in front of her. Demi, thanks for joining us, Richard said. We need to understand the situation with Hexagon Analytics. Olivia says there's an issue with compliance documentation? I sat down, opened my folder. Yes. The system we're scheduled to deploy tomorrow doesn't have the required HIPAA compliance documentation. This was flagged in August, but the issues weren't addressed. Olivia jumped in. We've had ongoing communication challenges with QA processes. I have documentation, I said, sliding copies across the table. Email from August 14th where I outlined the specific HIPAA requirements for this project. Follow-up emails from September 9th and 23rd asking for status updates on the compliance documentation. Responses from Ian saying it was being handled. Ian shifted uncomfortably. We focused on the technical implementation. The technical implementation is fine, I said. But HIPAA compliance isn't just about encryption and access controls. It requires documented policies, procedures, risk assessments, training records. None of that exists. Margaret, the CLO, was flipping through my documentation. Her expression was grave. These requirements are accurate. If we deploy without this documentation, we're exposing both ourselves and the client to significant regulatory risk. Can we create the documentation quickly? Richard asked. Not properly, I said. A legitimate HIPAA risk assessment alone takes several weeks. We'd need to evaluate every data flow, every potential vulnerability, document our safeguards. Then create corresponding policies and procedures. Then train the client's staff. This isn't something you can fake. What if we deploy with a disclaimer? Olivia suggested. Let the client know the documentation is forthcoming? Margaret shook her head. That might violate our contract terms. Most healthcare clients require proof of compliance before deployment. And it puts them in legal jeopardy if they start handling patient data without proper documentation in place. Richard turned to Ian. Why wasn't this addressed when Demi first raised it? Ian looked like he wanted to disappear. We were focused on getting the core functionality right. I thought the compliance stuff could be handled in parallel. But it wasn't, Richard said flatly. No. There was a long silence. Margaret was making notes. Richard was reading through my timeline. Olivia, he said finally, you removed Demi from the review process earlier this week? She nodded stiffly. To improve workflow efficiency. And this project was already in motion at that point? Yes, but... So this issue existed before the process change. Olivia didn't answer. Richard looked at me. If you were still in the review loop, would you have caught this before deployment? I already caught it, I said quietly. In August. It wasn't addressed. More silence. The weight of the documentation in front of them was undeniable. We need to delay deployment, Margaret said. There's no other option that doesn't expose us to massive liability. Richard nodded slowly. Agreed. Ian, you'll need to contact the client and explain the situation. We'll provide a revised timeline once we understand the full scope of work needed. I can help develop the compliance documentation, I offered. It's part of what my team does. Good, Richard said. We'll need that. He turned to Olivia. And we need to review what happened here. How did a critical compliance issue get flagged in August and still end up at crisis point in November? Olivia's jaw was tight. I'll prepare a full analysis. The meeting adjourned. As everyone filed out, Margaret caught my arm. Thank you for keeping those records, she said quietly. This could have been very bad. I just nodded. I went back to my desk. Sat there as the office emptied out. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange through the windows. My phone buzzed. An email from Richard. Demi, please schedule time with me tomorrow to discuss your role going forward. We need to ensure situations like this don't happen again. RV. I read it twice. Wasn't sure if it was good or bad. Didn't really care anymore. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Friday morning, I met with Richard in his office. He asked me to walk him through the entire Patterson and Hexagon situations, which I did. Showed him the patterns of my concerns being dismissed, the pressure to approve things faster, the gradual erosion of quality controls. He listened without interrupting. Took notes. This is concerning, he said when I finished. You've documented all of this? Yes. Good. Keep doing that. He paused. I'm going to be direct with you. Olivia was brought in to help us scale, but scaling doesn't mean abandoning the processes that made us successful. Your QA framework is valuable. The fact that you prevented these disasters is valuable. Thank you. I'm reinstating you to the full review process, effective immediately. And I'm going to work with Margaret to establish clearer escalation procedures so that when you flag critical issues, they get appropriate attention. Relief washed through me. I appreciate that. You were right to push back yesterday. That took courage. He met my eyes. I'm sorry we put you in that position. It was the first actual apology I'd received from leadership in months. It felt like something cracking open in my chest. Over the next few weeks, things shifted. Not completely, not overnight. But tangibly. The Hexagon deployment got pushed back 6 weeks. I worked with Ian's team and an outside compliance consultant to build the proper documentation. It was tedious, exhausting work, but we did it right. Olivia was quiet. Still ran the operations meetings, but with less swagger. She didn't challenge my review timelines anymore. I heard through office gossip that Richard and the board had a serious conversation with her about the near-miss disasters. Apparently, the Patterson probationary status had cost us 2 potential new clients who'd heard about the quality issues. In January, the company announced an organizational restructuring. Quality assurance was being elevated to a separate department, reporting directly to Richard instead of through operations. I was being promoted to Director of Quality Assurance with expanded authority. Olivia would remain VP of Operations, but her scope was being narrowed. More oversight, less autonomy. I didn't gloat. Didn't feel particularly victorious. Mostly just felt tired and relieved. On my first day as director, I met with my team. We talked about what had happened, what we'd learned, what we'd do differently going forward. We're the safety net, I told them. And that means sometimes we have to catch things that people don't want caught. Our job isn't to be popular. It's to be right. And to protect the company and our clients from preventable harm. One of the junior analysts, a sharp young woman named Kara, raised her hand. What if people push back? Try to override us? Then you document it. Escalate it. And you don't approve something you know is wrong, no matter how much pressure you're under. I paused. And if anyone ever makes you feel like doing your job correctly is a problem, you come to me. Immediately. They nodded. We got to work. Chloe stopped by my office later that week. Brought coffee. Congratulations on the promotion, she said. Thanks. And thanks for looping me in on Hexagon, even after I'd been cut out. I knew something was off. I just didn't have the background to know what. She shook her head. I'm glad you're back in the loop. Trying to do QA reviews on top of my development work was insane. Probably the point, I said. Yeah. She hesitated. For what it's worth, a lot of people were really uncomfortable with how you were being sidelined. We just didn't know what to do about it. I get it. It's hard to push back against management. You did, though. Eventually. I sipped my coffee. Took me a while to find my backbone. She smiled. Well, I'm glad you did. Looking back now, a few months later, I can see the whole arc of it clearly. How I went from being valued to being an obstacle to being vindicated. How close we came to real disaster. How easily it could have gone differently. If I hadn't kept those records. If I hadn't finally stood my ground in Olivia's office. If Richard hadn't been willing to listen. I think about that sometimes. About how many people in similar situations don't have the documentation, don't have the support, don't get the chance to prove they were right all along. I was lucky. But I also fought for myself when it mattered most. The biggest lesson? Trust your expertise. If you built something valuable, if you know your work matters, don't let anyone gaslight you into thinking you're the problem. When someone tells you you're too slow, too thorough, too cautious, ask yourself, are they right, or are they just frustrated that you won't let them cut corners? Sometimes being good at your job means being the person who says no. Who points out the problems? Who refuses to sign off on garbage just to keep things moving? It's uncomfortable. It'll make you unpopular. But it's necessary. And if your organization doesn't value that? If they'd rather have speed than quality, compliance than correctness? Then document everything. Build your case. And be ready to draw your line in the sand. Because you might be the only thing standing between success and catastrophe. And that's not being difficult. That's doing your job. I still work at Valiant Technologies. Olivia is still here too. We're professional with each other. Cordial, even. But she doesn't dismiss my review timelines anymore. Doesn't make jokes about me being overcautious. And when I flag a critical issue now, people listen. Not because they like me more. Not because I got nicer or more flexible. Because they learned what happens when they don't. That's the thing about being right. Eventually, if you stand firm long enough, reality catches up. And when it does, the people who doubted you either learn or leave. I'm still here. Still catching problems. Still being thorough. still being exactly what this company needs, whether they always appreciate it or not. And I'm fine with that.